Hi, boys and girls. It's Mrs. Batliner here to share another story about famous women that have made history. Today's story is called Brave Harriet. And if you look in the lower right hand corner, that little title that's down there from 2004, 2005, even though that was a very long time ago, this book was nominated as a young Hoosier picture book. And what that simply means is in the early 2000s, people thought that this was an amazing book and had it set up for an award. So, Brave Harriet, the first woman to fly the English Channel. So, her claim to fame is that she was a pilot and she was the first female to fly across some water. It's a strange thing to see an aeroplane fly. The thing is so gawky and bumbling on the ground, so spindly and flimsy looking. But then, once in the air, it soars with the grace and beauty of a hawk, strong enough to lift a person high above the trees and into the clouds. I hadn't grown up wishing to be a pilot because there were no planes when I was a girl. But once I saw one, I knew where I belonged. There, at the controls, with blue sky all around me. The day I saw my first plane was the same day I started flying lessons, eager for my chance to be all alone in my own great bird. My friends thought I was crazy. There I was, already a successful newspaper writer. Why would I risk my life in such a rattletrap, gum and spit contraption? But to me, there was no reason to be afraid. The only reason to soar, a longing to be among the first high up in the clouds. So her friends thought she was crazy wanting to get into one of those planes. But she said, nope, 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 nope. This is what I want to do. And that first time I flew solo, it was if I had finally found where I belonged. I didn't have to think about what to do. My body just knew. It was like I'd grown wings from my shoulders. Flying felt so natural. But it didn't seem natural to the licensing board when I applied for my pilot's license. No woman has ever received a license to fly, the official told me gruffly. You mean no woman has yet, I replied. I went on to pass not one, but two flight tests, cutting figure eights perfectly around two test pylons. And I admit it was very satisfying to see that official's face again as he handed me my license. The next day, I was already flying air shows. Barnstorming, we called it, doing loop-the-loops, wing walking, and flying around Staten Island by the light of the full moon. But it wasn't enough. I wanted more. That's when I decided to do it, to become the first woman to fly solo across the English Channel. So, if you look at the plane of when Harriet learned to fly, they are not like the planes that we have today, those big ones that fit all the people. If you look at it, it just fits one person. Raise your hand if you would like to be a pilot and fly the way that Harriet did. Oh, I don't know if I could raise my hand. It's kind of scary. Now, even other pilots thought I was crazy. Gustav Hamel, who had flown the channel himself, didn't think I could do it. Harriet, dear, he said, but I didn't feel very dear at all. This foolishness could be the death of you. It's beastly cold. You'll see nothing but blasted fog, and you'll only have a compass to guide you. I'm not afraid, I said calmly, and I have a good compass. But you understand that if you're off by a mere 5 miles, you'll end up over the North Sea and never be heard from again. It happened to a fellow just a few days ago. I can use a compass, I insisted. Gustav frowned and looked at his shoes, but he didn't give up. Look here, he persisted. You can have the glory without the danger. Here's my plan. I'll dress in your purple cloak and hood so no one can see my face. And pretending to be you, I'll fly the channel for you. We'll meet in France, switch clothing and places, and you'll fly the short bit to Calais to be greeted by a hero's welcome. I couldn't imagine a worse course of events. A hero's welcome for a fraud? No, thank you. You may be worried about what I can do, but I'm not. So look, that Gustav said, hey, let me dress up like you. I'll fly the channel, and then you'll get all the credit. Do you think that would be fair? No, I don't think so. I think that, she really wouldn't have done it. And that was the last time that Gustav tried to stop me. My mind was set on what I had to do, and even he could see that. Instead, he came with me to Dover to see me off. Monday, April 15th, 1912, was the day set for my flight. But as the sun dawned, the wind gusted and the sky churned with rain clouds. My little aeroplane would have been torn apart like a kite. So I waited and waited and wondered, was I doing the right thing? So, boys and girls, this was over 100 years ago. So when we had our 100 today and we were talking about what you do when you were 100, this thing was 100 years ago. So it was a long, long, long time ago that she did this. By dawn the next day, the skies were clear and calm, and I felt as sure as ever that I could do this. I could hang suspended between air and water, and it would feel right. I just knew it. Before I got into my plane, Gustav handed me a hot water bottle to tie around my waist. Remember, it's cold up there, he said, frowning. Thank you, Gustav, I smiled. I can't wait to find out for myself. So if you look at the picture down below there's her plane at the top. And there is Gustav giving her a hot water bottle to kind of wrap around her body because it gets so cold. As I climbed into the cockpit, Gustav joined the 6 other men, straining to hold my plane down. It had no brakes, so they kept me on the ground by pulling on the wheels and tail while I started the engine. I adjusted my goggles, held my compass tightly, and gave them a thumbs up. The men let go, and the plane bumped into the air. I was off. At 5:35 a.m., my plane left England's soil, heading over the cliffs of Dover, across the Channel, and on to France. Ladies and gentlemen, thumbs up if you think she did it. Let's see. So there she is over the channel. You'll notice, what do you notice down in the water? Yeah, there's like a boat that's following her. It was my first time to fly by compass. It was my first time to fly over water. And it was my first time to cross the English Channel. The crossing was all I imagined it to be. The blue overhead, the blue beneath, and the blue all around. Below me, I could see a tugboat full of reporters following my path. Then they disappeared as I was wrapped in a thick mist. The blue was gone, and there was nothing to see but white, a cold, wet whiteness, like the foam of a wave. By 6 o'clock, my goggles had clouded up, so I pushed them up on my forehead. Without them, I still saw only whiteness. I should have been terrified, but oh, it was so beautiful. As much a part of flying as being in the vast clear blue. And I had my compass to guide me. All I had to do was follow the path east and trust my plane to do the rest. So, boys and girls, look at, she cannot see anything. So she has to trust her compass. By 6:30, however, I was so cold I could scarcely feel my own hands. The white fog had crept into my bones, and I worried I would not stay alert and so would miss my compass heading. The plane suddenly lurched, and I was all sharp attention again. Something was wrong. The plane was tilting sharply, and the steep pitch caused the engine to misfire. The motor began to sputter. There was no time to think, only time to act. I lowered the plane as steadily as I could, hoping to pancake onto the water with a gentle landing. Oh no! But just as suddenly as the trouble had begun, the sparking stopped and the motor again purred smoothly. And now, below the clouds, I could see the coast of France. My fingers still numb with cold, my heart still pounding from the sparks. I couldn't even look for Calais, but brought the plane to land on the sandy beach. It was all over so quickly. It was scarcely 7 a.m., and I had come so far. Was she successful? She was. A crowd of French fishermen and their families rushed over to greet me. The great fish fallen from the sky. The women hoisted me aloft once again in triumph, while the men pushed my plane up the beach, away from the rising tide. It was a wonderful welcome. Best of all, one fishwife set up a table right there on the beach and sat me down to a good hot cup of tea. As I warmed my hands around the wide, thick, steaming bowl, I could see the headlines already. American woman flies over the channel. And it might have been so. It truly might have been. But it was April 16th, 1912. And for that day, and for days afterward, there was other news that eclipsed mine. So if you look at the newspaper, what does the newspaper say? Yeah, Titanic disaster. So she did this as the first woman to go across the English Channel, but she didn't really get any recognition because the Titanic, that big boat that had hit an iceberg and killed so many people, that happened on the same day that she did the flight. So the news was all about that disaster. Oh, that's kind of a bummer. But it didn't matter because I knew I had done it. I had my time in the clouds, my time surrounded by blue, and that was enough for me. So, boys and girls, this is a great lesson. It didn't matter that the whole world knew that she had done it. She knew that she did it. So it didn't matter that anybody else didn't know. Author's note. This story is based on the life of Harriet Quimby, the first American woman to receive a pilot's license and the first woman to fly solo across the English Channel. The description of her flight are taken from the newspaper article she wrote about it as a reporter for the New York Herald. When Harriet made her flight in 1912, the aeroplane was still young as a machine, a wooden open-air contraption that looked about as strong as a good box kite. More than a decade would pass before planes would have the enclosed metal cockpits that we associate with Amelia Earhart and Charles Lindbergh. But there already existed a breed of daredevil pilots, and Harriet was among them. She made a name as an exhibition flyer, performing for the inauguration of the President of Mexico in 1911, then setting her sights on crossing the English Channel. Gustav Hamel, an early aviator who had already successfully crossed the Channel, did actually offer to trade places with Harriet. So convinced was he that the flight was beyond a woman's ability. Harriet proved him wrong, and she worked hard to promote commercial aviation and a place for women within it. She even foresaw a day when passengers would regularly be carried on flights of 50 or 60 miles. Unfortunately for Harriet, her landing in France coincided with the news of the sinking of the Titanic. The newspapers were filled with the news of the tragedy, and Harriet's feet didn't even make the back pages of the New York Herald. She was determined to keep flying, however, and died doing what she loved, soaring into the blue. The Boston Post wrote about her death. Ambitious to be among the pathfinders, she took her chances like a man and died like one. Her gravestone expresses that daring as well. There is no reason to be afraid. So I'm not exactly sure, but I'm assuming that she was in a plane crash, and that's how she ended. Her life kind of ended. But here is an actual picture of Harriet Quimby. And you'll notice, look at that. So you can imagine she was so far above in the clouds that it was so cold. Her hands were numb. And here's another picture of her. And here's the English Channel. So you can kind of see she went from one side over to the other side. So she went from England and she went over to France. Now, I'm not exactly sure at what point where she flew across the channel, because if you look, some of it is wider than others. But the thing is that she actually went, it says that she went from Dover. So if you look at Dover, it's at the very, very lower part of the UK. And then it said that she went to Calais. So if you look, it looks like she went right over that Strait of Dover, which is pretty exciting. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something new about a pilot that you may not have ever heard of. All right, I will see you the next time.